This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Otelia Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Japan and the UK vow to step up security cooperation. Their defense ministers meeting in Tokyo call ties unprecedented and stress that peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific is inseparable from Europe's. North Korea's Kim Jong-un and Russia's Vladimir Putin are among 26 world leaders heading to Beijing for China's Victory Day military parade next week, notably missing top figures from the US and Europe. Taiwan's first cabinet reshuffle under President William Lai sees 16 posts changed across 10 ministries, a reset aimed at speeding up policy making and rebuilding public trust in the ruling party. Semiconductor juggernaut Nvidia stokes jitters about future demand for AI computing. An underwhelming sales forecast sending shares of the world's most valuable company into reverse. Ahead on East Asia tonight, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to embark on a two-nation visit. First to Japan, then China. In Tokyo, trade and security is expected to top the agenda. We'll be bringing you the details and insights from an expert. Japan and the UK have pledged to advance defense and security cooperation. Their defense ministers met in Tokyo today, vowing to support peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. Japan's defense minister, Jen Nakatani, said that ties between the two countries have reached an unprecedented level. His British counterpart, John Healey, stressed that security in the Indo-Pacific is inseparable from security in the Euro-Atlantic. This comes as Tokyo welcomes the HMS Prince of Wales, the flagship of the UK carrier strike group, as part of a goodwill visit. It's in Japan as part of a 12-nation strike group of 4,000 personnel on an 8-month mission. It's also the first ever port call to Tokyo by a foreign aircraft carrier. For more on this, Mitch Ishida, she joins us live from Tokyo. Mitch, the two defense ministers, they gave a press statement indicating a historic cooperation in defense as well as security. Share with us some of the details.
Hi, Ateli. Well, the two countries actually held security drills ahead of the meeting. Now, Japanese Defense Minister Gen Nakatani said, for the first time, Japan's self-defense force provided asset protection measures for the UK armed forces. Now, the drills extended in the air, sea, and on land, in space, cyberspace, and they agreed on involving more women. And they agreed to sign a contract at the end of this year on the three-nation fighter jet development program, which includes Italy. Now, UK Defense Secretary John Healey added to Mr. Nakatani's remarks, and he said, for the first time, UK's F-35B aircraft landed on the deck of a Japanese vessel. For the first time, Japan's F-15 was deployed to Europe and the UK. Now, they met reporters just before heading to HMS Prince of Wales, which just docked in Tokyo for the first time. It's the UK's biggest warship. And before Tokyo, the warship was in Yokosuka in Kanagawa Prefecture, where U.S. and the Self-Defense Force have their naval bases. Now, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba went on board of the ships and also of Japanese destroyer Kaga docked nearby. Now, here's more on the importance of security ties, according to Mr. Healey.
The intensive program of military exercises and diplomatic activity that we have organised around the carrier strike group underlines the shared interests, the shared values, and the shared understanding that we have as two nations that the security of the Indo-Pacific is interlinked and indivisible with security in the Euro-Atlantic.
Mitch, such deepening cooperation is significant for Japan. How so?
Well, for Japan, U.S. is its only ally. And the U.S. presence is huge here in Japan with military bases all over. But it's been expanding security ties beyond the U.S. given the uncertainty of U.S. commitment in the Indo-Pacific. Now, tension is severe in the region surrounding Japan, according to authorities here. China is building up its military might. Japan is concerned of China's assertive action in the East China Sea, South China Sea. North Korea is advancing its missile and nuclear capabilities and joining forces with Russia. And people here say East Asia could be the next Ukraine. Regarding the UK, Japan formed a reciprocal access agreement in 2023. It was called the most important defense treaty between the two nations then, but it's gone beyond that this time. And Japan today sees Australia also as a quasi-ally. Recently, Australia has announced its purchase of Japanese vessel, bringing the two nations even closer in security ties. And Japan has upgraded its security pact with the Philippines with reciprocal access similar to that with the UK and Australia. So all these broadening of defense and security ties show how it's important for Japan to work with countries other than the United States.
Hey, thanks for sharing. Michio Ishida there, speaking to us live from Tokyo. 26 world leaders are set to attend a huge military parade in Beijing next week to mark 80 years since the end of World War II, following Japan's surrender. Among the foreign heads of state and government are North Korean leader Kim Jong and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Also leaders from Southeast Asian nations, including Vietnam, Indonesia and Malaysia. Notably absent, though, are top leaders from the US and major European Union countries. CNA's Tan Si-hui has more.
After months of speculation, the guest list for China's upcoming Victory Day military parade has finally been unveiled. In the first of 3 news conferences ahead of its World War II anniversary on September 3rd, Chinese officials announced the guest list, hailing representation from across the globe.
这体现出各国对于中方举办这次纪念活动的高度重视和对中国人民的友好情谊。二是代表性强，出席人员覆盖了世界5大洲，表明国际社会对中国抗战的历史贡献和世界意义的普遍认可。
But what has grabbed headlines is the presence of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who will make a rare trip out of his country. His first visit to China in 6 years will see him feature alongside Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping, who all face tensions with the West. Absent, though, are top leaders from the United States and major EU countries, the only exception being the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico. Analysts saying the absence could be a deliberate choice to avoid being seen as legitimizing China's military assertiveness in the region.
Only a select few major leaders from the West will be in attendance, because clearly the West and China, they have some strategic issues that they need to resolve, and they are basically from opposing camps internationally, after all.
China's parade next week is expected to involve tens of thousands of troops and showcase the country's latest military hardware. At the news conference, CNA asked about perceptions that the parade was a show of China's growing strength.
我们举行阅兵式，是为了彰显走和平发展道路的坚定决心，捍卫国家主权和领土完整的坚强意志，维护世界和平的强大能力。
The commemorative events are also taking place amid ongoing security tensions in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea. The September 3rd parade in Beijing will take place just days after the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Leaders Summit in nearby Tianjin. That kicks off this weekend and is touted by China as the biggest gathering for the bloc to date. Some leaders are expected to be present at both events, and all eyes will certainly be on the kind of messaging that will be put out by Chinese leaders. Tan Si-hui, CNA, Beijing.
Taiwan's Premier Jong has presented the new lineup in what the government calls a major cabinet reshuffle. The change is taking place as President William Lai faces record low approval ratings and pressure to prove his government is still in touch with the public. CNA's Victoria Jen with this report.
It's the first reshuffle since President Lai took office last year. Office holders in 16 posts have been changed across 10 ministries. Premier Jong calls it a reset designed to speed up policy making and rebuild public trust. And it comes just days after the governing DPP's attempt to remove the largest number of sitting opposition lawmakers in the island's history ended in complete failure.
我会要求未来所有的内阁团队要加速行动，积极认识，要有感施政，而且要我本身做起。我们用同样的标准来回应给国人在这段时间对整个执政团队所有的指教，所有强烈的要求。
Among the most recognizable faces in the new team are two leaders from Taiwan's campaign against the COVID-19 pandemic. Shi Chongliang moves from heading the National Health Insurance Administration to become the new health minister, joined by Center for Disease Control Chief Zhang Renxiang as his deputy. The government is calling the new cabinet AI Action Cabinet 2.0, and it's hoping their credibility will help restore confidence at a time when Lai's approval ratings have slumped to their lowest levels since he took office last year. But the real pressing issue for the government is the economy. Taiwan is feeling the pinch from global tariffs, a reciprocal rate of 20% from the U.S., a volatile currency, and weak domestic demand. The new economic minister, Gong Mingxin, replaces Guo Zhihui, who resigned, citing health reasons. Gong is a former board member of TSMC, the world's largest chip maker. Business leaders say they expect him to steady the ship and find new ways to spur growth. Still, critics question whether this reshuffle is more about image than impact.
我如果用棒球的这个比赛来形容的话，它几乎就是一垒手换到二垒，二垒调到外野，外野再调一个进来啊，大概就是内部做这样子的一个摆动。这个想要解决目前赖政府所面临的重大的挑战，是不乐观的哈。
The government has also created a new Ministry of Sports to be led by the 2020 and 2024 Olympic badminton champion Li Yang. It's meant to channel national pride and project a government that feels closer to the people. For the Lai administration, this reshuffle is about more than filling posts. It's about convincing voters that it's listening. After a string of defeats at the ballot box and the president's ratings falling to new lows. But analysts say unless this cabinet delivers real change, public frustration could continue, or worse, deepen. Victoria Jen, CNA, Taipei.
Coming up next on East Asia tonight, South Korea's central bank warns of a significant hit to growth because of 15% U.S. tariffs on exports. And China could face higher tariffs from Mexico, its top global destination for vehicle imports. Hello again. Great to have your company in East Asia tonight. It is now time for your business news with Roland Lim. Now, Roland, chip maker Nvidia. Let's talk about its latest earnings that's out. It reported record growth, strong profits, and yet its shares slipped. So what's that all about?
Well, shares slipped on concerns over slowing growth and access to China. Remember, the mainland market is worth $50 billion to Nvidia, and Nvidia's report card closely watched as a bellwether for the AI sector. Nvidia gave a tepid revenue forecast for the current period, despite reporting a more than 50% jump in second quarter sales. It cautioned that uncertainty about China sales could slow growth this quarter, and that stoked market jitters, igniting worries that AI spending could be hitting a plateau. The company predicts revenues of some $54 billion for the third quarter, but some analysts had penciled in more than $60 billion. This forecast does not include any revenue from China, where it's facing U.S. export restrictions and pressure from Beijing. The lukewarm outlook dragged down Nvidia shares in after hours, and they are down about 1.4% in pre-market trade. Year-to-date, though, the stock is still up 31%. It also announced an additional $60 billion stock buyback. For the quarter to July, revenue rose 56% to $47 billion, beating estimates. Earnings per share also higher than expected. On the earnings call, CEO Jensen Huang dismissed concerns about an end to a spending boom on AI chips. He said that it will only go up in the next 5 years, adding that China could represent a $50 billion opportunity for Nvidia this year. He cited the early license approval to sell H20 chips to some Chinese entities. For more on this, we're joined by CNA's Tan Yu Guan, joining us live from Shanghai. Yu Guan, good to talk to you as always. Nvidia's second quarter report card, it stated that it had zero sales of H20 chips to China, specially designed for that market, completely excluding H20 sales in the third quarter as well to China. What do you make of this about the future of H20 sales?
Well, Nvidia's Q2 results actually ends 27th July. The lifting of the US ban on those chips was in mid-July, July 15. So having zero H2O sales to China in the second quarter means that resuming those sales is not as easy or as quick a process as we think, as easy as turning on a tap, for example. So what's even more significant, as you said, Nvidia completely excluded H2O sales to China for its Q3 outlook. So it's very likely H2O sales hasn't materialized 6 weeks after the lifting of the ban. What's more, reports last week from The Information and Reuters also said that Nvidia asked its suppliers to halt work related to H2O. This included an Arizona-based company which handles advanced packaging, Samsung, which provides memory, and the Reuters report also cited Foxconn as another supplier affected. Now, even though the US ban was lifted about 6 weeks ago, we don't have any clarity on the rules other than the reported 15% tax on such exports. So far, for example, we have not seen any public details as to whether Nvidia or anyone for that matter has paid the unprecedented fee to the US government for exporting those chips, and even which exact agency handling the collection hasn't been officially specified. Roland?
So Nvidia is also facing headwinds from the Chinese side as well.
Indeed, Beijing has expressed security qualms about the chips. Cyberspace Administration of China, the primary regulator involved, officially summoned Nvidia demanding explanation and documentation regarding potential backdoor security risks, tracking capabilities, and remote shutdown features embedded in the chips. Now, this occurred around end July. Nvidia has, of course, denied those claims. However, those claims, whether true or not, is pretty immaterial. What it does is that it sends chills to potential Chinese buyers and users of Nvidia's chips. That the writing is on the wall. Beijing is now watching this. Now, what's more, while there's still no ban on H2O chips in mid-August, Financial Times reported that the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology on the Chinese side asked companies to justify their purchases of the H2O chip, particularly why they chose Nvidia over domestic alternative, making it even more of a political risk to buy H2O. We must remember all this comes just a few years after Beijing cracked the whip on the tech sector to get them in line with the government. Roland?
So what you're saying is that it's safe to say then that Beijing really doesn't welcome the lifting of the H20 ban then?
Well, aside from the security qualms, top leaders have also made it clear in recent statements that they want local firms to develop or use local chip technology. Way back in April, Xi Jinping himself, the president, called on the country to strengthen basic research, concentrate resources to overcome challenges in core tech, such as high-tech chips, foundational software, and build an independent, controllable, and collaboratively functioning AI foundational software and hardware system. Now, that said, some Western watchers do point out the possibility that all this is a poker game and that Beijing is actually pushing for slightly more advanced Blackwell chips. But if we were to look at the Chinese reaction to comments made by the US Commerce Secretary about not selling technology, top technology to China, I think it's safe to say that that's not the case. His remarks were deemed as insulting by many people in the country, including reportedly senior Chinese leaders. Now, and it was also after those remarks that we had the reaction from the Cyberspace Administration of China.
So what was it about Mr. Lutnick's remarks that has people in China so fired up?
Now, if you recall, he told CNBC last month, and I quote, "We don't sell them our best stuff, not our second best stuff, not even our third best stuff. We want to sell the Chinese enough that the developers get addicted to the American technology stack." That's the thinking. Now, I think that's a very unfortunate choice of words, sell Chinese stuff to get them addicted. Now, I reckon that touched a raw nerve, given that, everyone here is very well schooled on the 100 years of humiliation and the opium wars. Now, that is when, Britain tried to get the Chinese addicted to opium in an attempt to balance the trade and a huge demand for Chinese tea and silk. Now, the reaction on the Chinese social media has been to call those remarks very insulting. One blogger with 2 million followers called it a carefully calculated political humiliation. Others echoed remarks by the senior leadership to call on Chinese scientists to work harder to replace foreign technology. One netizen sarcastically thanked the US Commerce Secretary for buying time for localization, meaning the localization of chip technology. Roland?
Well, sounds like Lutnick was a little bit too candid. Yuguan, thanks for that report. Tan Yuguan reporting live from Shanghai. A Singapore state investor, Temasek, set to undergo its first major restructuring since 2011 as it navigates global trade tensions and shifting rules. From next April, the group will be split into 3 investment entities. The move follows previous reports that said that Temasek would split into 3 units to boost returns. Sharing those changes with the media, Temasek CEO Dylan Pillay Sandrasekhara says that the group's organizational structure needs to evolve amid changes in the operating landscape while building a leadership pipeline. As a result, 3 entities will be formed. Temasek Singapore will focus on growing local firms. Temasek Global Investment will drive overseas investments targeting established and emerging market leaders, while Temasek Partnership Solutions will allocate capital to funds and to build relationships with investors. The 3 entities will manage the portfolio with a 40-40-20 split.
We need to actually make sure that our organizational structure is fit for this new environment we find ourselves in. And that means that for the operating businesses, because we have 3 portfolio engines, we have the Singapore portfolio, we have the global portfolio, we have also funds and asset management companies. It's very important for us to be very focused on what we have to deliver for each. That means in terms of returns and other outcomes that we want to have. At the same time, maintaining the collaboration that we've seen between all the 3 segments that we have the benefit of today.
South Korea's central bank expects a significant shock from higher U.S. tariffs even after a trade deal. It's estimating the impact of the levies to shave off close to half a percentage point of growth for this year. The Bank of Korea's annual growth projections now stands at just below 1% for this year and 1.6% for next year. The central bank held rates as widely expected for the second straight review. It's looking to limit a buildup of mortgage debt while monitoring the impact of government stimulus policies. The benchmark Kospi index ending the day 0.29% higher. The Korean won is also advancing by close to 0.5% against the dollar, 1,386.56 won to the dollar. The Bank of Korea has cut 4 times since last October and has kept rates unchanged at 2.5% for the second straight meeting. It's focusing on risk from climbing apartment prices in key cities and growing household debt. China will reportedly be facing more tariffs from Mexico. According to a Bloomberg report, the North American nation is planning to hike tariffs on Chinese imports in a bid to protect domestic industry and to align with Washington's long-standing call to raise duties on Beijing. The proposal is part of President Claudia Sheinbaum's upcoming 2026 budget. Now, there's no official word yet on the scope and range of the tariffs, but they are said to target cars, textiles, and plastics industries. These are under pressure from cheap, often subsidized Chinese goods. Cost-effective Chinese car brands have rapidly gained ground in Mexico, undercutting U.S. and Japanese competitors by up to 20%. The draft revenue proposal is scheduled to be sent to Congress by September the 8th. News of the higher duties rattling Chinese car makers as Mexico is now the top global destination for Chinese vehicles. Shares of BYD in Hong Kong slipping 3% today, while SAIC ended the day unchanged in Shanghai, but that was after a roller coaster session. And that'll do it for business. Ocelli.
Thanks so much, Roland. Right, time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi set to embark on a 2-day visit to Japan, with issues of trade and security expected to be high on the agenda. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Japan and the UK pledging to advance defense and security cooperation. Their defense chiefs met in Tokyo today as they vow to support peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. A North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, and a Russian President Vladimir Putin among 26 foreign heads of state set to attend China's Victory Day military parade next week. And semiconductor juggernaut Nvidia stokes jitters about future demand for AI computing. An underwhelming sales forecast sending shares of the world's most valuable company into reverse. Now, North Korea stresses the need to strengthen its special operations forces as a top priority for the country's military buildup. Well, state media reporting that leader Kim Jong-un made those comments during a visit to a training base, just as the U.S. and South Korea wrap up their final day of joint drills. According to KCNA, Mr. Kim inspected the armed forces training sessions, including their weapons and drills. He highlighted the snipers unit, calling them a pivotal force in war operations. Now, Mr. Kim also called for the modernization of the nation's military assets and development of warfare tactics. His visit comes a day after Pyongyang renewed its criticism of the military exercise between the U.S. and South Korea, saying that they are intended to, quote, ignite a war. Now, the 11-day Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise is the first major drills conducted by the allies since South Korean President Lee Jae-myung took office. They are meant to bolster the two nations' combat readiness and ability to deter aggression in the face of threats they perceive from North Korea, as well as Pyongyang's deepening military ties with Russia. In the meantime, Russia and China carried out their first-ever joint submarine patrol in the Asia-Pacific, underscoring closer naval cooperation. Russia's defense ministry said its diesel-electric submarine, the Volhov, joined a Chinese sub to patrol the Sea of Japan and the East China Sea. The Volhov covered more than 3,000 kilometers from Vladivostok and has returned to base. Moscow says the mission began in early August, just shortly after the two navies completed their Maritime Interaction 2025 drills in the region. Japan's top trade negotiator, Ryosei Akazawa, has cancelled his trip to Washington at the last minute as a U.S.-Japan tariff deal requires further details to be ironed out at the working level, according to government sources. Mr. Akazawa had planned to meet the U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to finalize a $550 billion investment package that Tokyo has offered to Washington. Well, that would be in exchange for the slashing of auto tariffs from the current 27.5% to 15%. Japan is also seeking a swift correction to Washington's reciprocal tariffs on its goods, which does not exempt the nation from tariff stacking. Now, the U.S. has earlier reduced levies on Japanese goods to 15%. No new date has been set for Mr. Akazawa's next visit, but a government source says he could head to Washington as early as next week. Meantime, officials say the two countries will continue tariff discussions at the administrative level. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is travelling to Japan with an eye on shoring up bilateral ties as well as strengthening regional alliances. More trade, new investments, as well as a new pact on critical minerals are among the items on the agenda. Ishan Garg tells us more from New Delhi.
This will be Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first India-Japan annual summit with Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, and there's a lot to be discussed between the two leaders.
The dialogue is likely to focus on deepening trade and technology ties amid risks to the Indian economy from US tariffs and on beefing up defense cooperation with an eye on countering China's influence in the Indo-Pacific region.
During Mr. Modi's visit, India and Japan could sign a new pact on critical minerals and semiconductors. These items are crucial not only for Indian businesses but also for the country's national security, which is why analysts say India is skeptical about sourcing these from China and would rather rely on a time-tested friend.
Where is the strategic trust more? You have an answer. You are relying on a partner with whom you have a great bilateral relationship, also a very important partner in the Quad, to balance during a period of extreme geopolitical turmoil.
At a time when the US's commitment to the Quad, a grouping that also includes India, Japan and Australia, looks shaky, Indian officials say Mr. Modi's visit will bolster this regional alliance. Though the Quad is seen as a counterbalancing power to China in the region, India says the bloc is focused on issues like bolstering supply chains and infrastructure development.
A key piece of infrastructure likely to feature in Modi-Ishiba talks could be India's ambitious bullet train project. Reports say that Japan could be supplying its high-speed Shinkansen trains to India to link India's financial capital Mumbai to Ahmedabad in Prime Minister Modi's home state, Gujarat.
Japan is also expected to announce doubling its investment plans in India to $68 billion over the next decade. It could cover sectors such as AI, semiconductors and clean energy. A possibly welcome move when India is looking to diversify its trading partners.
In a tumultuous global order, there is a country like India requires that capacity and capability building investment, which Japan has, and India provides Japan the markets to push that through.
Experts say Tokyo might be India's most dependable ally in the East.
At a time when India's ties with the US are strained, its relationship with China just starting to improve, and its partnership with Russia tested by Western pressure, India could look at deepening its alliance with Tokyo. Ishan Garg, CNA, New Delhi.
For more analysis, we are joined now by Harsh Pant. He is Professor of International Relations at King's India Institute, King's College London. Well, thanks, Professor, for joining us this evening. First up, tell us, what exactly makes this India-Japan tie so critical in today's global climate?
I think India-Japan relations have always been very, very important for both countries. They have been steady partners. They have had a shared outlook on the Indo-Pacific, and they have built their relationship gradually over a period of time across domains. But at this particular point in time, both countries are looking at turbulence in the Indo-Pacific with a rising China and assertive China, but also an administration in Washington that seems no longer keen to go by the older principles and promises when it comes to the region. So I think both for Tokyo and for New Delhi, it is an important time to renew that partnership and to strengthen that relationship, keeping in mind the challenges that they are facing from around the world, both geopolitical and geoeconomic. And that is why this particular visit becomes so important insofar as India is concerned.
And this renewal of partnership, part of that is the whole idea that Japan has pledged to commit some $68 billion fresh investments for India. So what does this scale up actually signal about Japan's long-term economic bet on India?
I think Japan is betting that India's economic rise, is good for Japan. It is good for the Indo-Pacific. And Japan is also betting that as both India and Japan look to reduce their exposure, over reliance on China, they can build their partnership, they can build the bilateral aspect of their partnership through this extensive economic engagement. And I think infrastructure has been one area where India has been investing a lot, and infrastructure is what is going to lay the foundations of the next stage of India's economic success story. And Japan, therefore, is betting that by investing in that, Japan will not only have the first mover advantage, but Japan can also signify that it remains a very, very valued and important partner in the economic trajectory that India is pursuing.
And also with this first mover advantage, as you've said, how do you think that's going to reshape Asia's investment landscape?
I think for Japan and for India, it is important that like-minded countries in the region continue to enhance their economic cooperation landscape, because one of the problems that the world's and particularly the Indo-Pacific is facing is that there is an extensive over-reliance on China, and America seems at this point less interested in economic engagement with the region. So for two major economies in the region to work with each other to ensure that there is a trade and investment going both ways becomes a crucial component in the restructuring of the larger economic relationships that exist in the region. As there is less of an interest in broader multilateral arrangements, there is going to be greater interest in bilateral economic arrangements, as can be seen by the signing of a number of BTAs and FTAs that are spreading around the world, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. And I think both these big economies like Japan and India want to ensure that they are part of each other's economic success stories, but also give enough alternative to other actors, say like ASEAN, that are also looking to reduce their dependence on China.
In other words, this India-Japan relations could become a blueprint for wider, whether it's South Asia, East Asia cooperation and ASEAN included. How much does Trump's policies uncertainty actually play into all of that as well?
I think at the moment it plays into this a lot. Both Japan and India have been important partners of the US. Japan, of course, a treaty alliance partner, and India a strategic partner in its own right. And I think what we are now witnessing is that both these partnerships are coming under strain. Both these countries are looking at enhancing their partnerships with other like-minded countries in the region. And India and Japan have always been like-minded. There are no political differences between India and Japan. And I think that the relationship, therefore, can be an anchor at a time of great turbulence, and can be an anchor for the wider region, which is looking for some sense of direction. And so the hope would be that as Prime Minister Modi travels to Japan, he's able to ensure that the relationship, the past momentum in the relationship continues to sustain itself, but also that the turbulence that Mr. Trump has unleashed in the world and in the Indo-Pacific, that can be managed better by two of the economic and strategic actors in the region like India and Japan.
Now, Prime Minister Modi, he's going from Tokyo and then straight to the SCO summit in China. Let's talk about India's balancing act, between Quad and also all these Beijing-led forums. How is that, helping Japan's own Indo-Pacific vision in all of this?
I think in some ways, India has always looked at these minilaterals, like Quad or BRICS or SCO, as focused on certain projects, certain aspects of its foreign policy. These are seen as coalitions of like-minded countries that are working on specific areas. Quad, for example, is largely aimed at Indo-Pacific, where it is the four big actors like Australia, Japan, India, and the US can provide an alternative to the smaller states in the region. But also, I think we have seen, for example, SCO, which is seen as a player in the Central Asian landscape, which is a mandate of ensuring that terrorism, extremism, fundamentalism does not get out of hand, and that it is managed within the boundaries of the region itself. And I think having a friend like India present in platforms like the SCO or BRICS helps countries like Japan to ensure that these platforms do not become simply a means of an extension of one particular power, in this case China, but has the ability to bring together countries which, like India, can perhaps also bring diversity of views in these platforms, but also ensure that these platforms remain balanced and not take on a one-sided perspective.
Well, thanks very much for your analysis, Harsh Pant there, Professor of International Relations at King's India Institute, King's College London. Right, we are going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, South Korean lawmakers have voted to ban the use of mobile phones in schools. We'll tell you why after the break. Plus, Hong Kong conducts a major anti-terrorism exercise as it gears up to host international events, including a Belt and Road Summit later this year. U.S. Defense Chief Pete Hegseth has assured that Chinese nationals will no longer be servicing the Pentagon cloud, that our computer service remotely hosting potentially sensitive American defense data. His comments come about a month after a report detailing the U.S. Defense Department's dependence on Microsoft software engineers based in China. Mr. Hegseth said he was made aware in July of Microsoft's digital escort program that was introduced during the Obama administration. Now, Microsoft was said to have utilized Chinese coders for about a decade to support the Pentagon's cloud systems. Mr. Hegseth said the Pentagon has issued a formal letter of concern to Microsoft, describing the program as a, quote, breach of trust, and that it exposed the Defense Department to unacceptable risk.
All Department of Defense software vendors will identify and terminate any Chinese involvement in DoD systems. It blows my mind that I'm even saying these things. It's such common sense that we ever allowed it to happen. That's why we're attacking it so hard. We expect vendors doing business with the Department of Defense to put U.S. national security ahead of profit maximization.
Just last week, it was reported that Microsoft had limited access by a number of Chinese companies to its early warning system for cybersecurity vulnerabilities. It followed speculation that Beijing was involved in a hacking campaign launched against Microsoft SharePoint servers in July. China has denied its involvement in any of the cyber intrusions. Hong Kong has conducted an anti-terrorism exercise at its Kai Tak cruise terminal, the first such exercise at this location involving 500 personnel. And it comes as Hong Kong prepares to host a number of international events, such as the Belt and Road Initiative Summit next month, as well as the National Games in November. Mei Wong with a report.
Hong Kong may not be under any immediate terror threat right now, but with the various conflicts happening around the world, this city prefers to be safe rather than sorry. It has conducted various similar exercises in key locations like its international airport and MTR train station. This time it's holding it at the cruise terminal to practice the response and coordination of the different agencies like the police, fire services and immigration. A simulation of a bomb going off at Hong Kong's Kai Tak cruise terminal. But that's not all. Another attack on sea. Air support swoops in to respond and help. Multiple simulated attacks to test the response and techniques of dealing with a potential terror attack in Hong Kong's renowned Victoria Harbour.
It's also a very open space. So that's why it is quite vulnerable or easier for other terrorists or extremists using ships or boats as a means of attacks. So it's also one of the vulnerable points here.
It's an exercise which authorities do not want to see it turned into reality. But such threats remain, and Hong Kong wants to ensure it's ready across all counter-terrorism units.
Hong Kong is a metropolitan city, and we have also quite a visa-free environment. So that's why it's also an attractive point for global terrorists or extremists to choose Hong Kong as a target. So that's why we have to maintain our city preparedness against such a terrorist threat.
As a financial and trading hub, Hong Kong believes it needs to consistently keep its guard up. Any potential terror attack could potentially create public chaos and also severely damage the economic stability and dent investor confidence. That is something that Hong Kong cannot afford to experience. Mei Wong, CNA, Hong Kong.
A Hong Kong court has wrapped up closing arguments in the national security trial of media tycoon Jimmy Lai. A verdict is set to be delivered at a later date. Well, the 77-year-old, who has been detained for more than 4 years, is the founder of the now-defunct pro-democracy paper Apple Daily. He's accused of conspiring with half a dozen former executives to publish seditious articles between 2019 and 2021. Prosecutors also say that Lai colluded with foreign forces after Beijing imposed the national security law in 2020. Well, he has pleaded not guilty. If convicted, he faces up to life in prison. Now, tech addiction can manifest in various ways, including spending excessive time on one's smartphone. Well, the phenomenon's prompted South Korean authorities to pass a bill banning students' use of mobile phones or electronic devices in classrooms. And this also comes amid growing concerns over the impact of social media use among young people. A nationwide ban will come into effect in March next year. And the move adds South Korea to a growing list of countries introducing similar restrictions in schools. Now, Japan slightly eased a strict 2009 no-phone policy so as to allow junior high school students to receive emergency alerts during disasters, such as earthquakes. Now, a ban is still maintained for elementary school students. Toyoake City in Aichi Prefecture is trying to go above and beyond. It's proposing to limit all of its 69,000 residents to just 2 hours of smartphone use a day, outside periods of work and study. Officials, however, said that the rule won't be strictly enforced. Well, China banned phones in primary and secondary school classrooms since 2021. And authorities say it's meant to protect children's eyesight, help improve their concentration in class, and prevent internet addiction. But do these bans actually work? In the Netherlands, a study found that removing phones from classrooms have helped students improve their grades, focus, and even social interaction. Still, some experts and students remain skeptical. Critics argue that simply banning phones may not address the root causes of addiction. Last year, Australia banned social media access for children under 16. It said that online platforms were negatively impacting the young. YouTube was added to the mix in July. And that wraps up Thursday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. You can also always find us on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.